5 years ago, Daniel's investments crossed a number that meant he technically didn't need his paycheck anymore. He still went to work that day, and the day after, and every day since. Wait, you've been financially independent for 5 years and I'm just now finding out? Nothing about Daniel's life visibly changed. Same apartment for 2 more years, same car, same job. That's not an accident, it's the actual point of how this works. Today we're covering what financial independence really means, the number behind it, how your savings rate, not your income, decides the timeline, and why reaching it often looks like absolutely nothing at all. Financial independence isn't a specific amount of money, it's a relationship between two numbers. It's the point where your investments could realistically cover your annual living expenses without you needing to work for income at all. A commonly cited starting point rule of thumb, popularized by research often called the Trinity study, suggests that a portfolio of about 25 times your annual expenses could support roughly a 4% annual withdrawal rate over a long retirement. Historically, in most modeled scenarios, this is a rule of thumb, not a guarantee. Actual safe withdrawal rates depend heavily on market conditions in your specific retirement years, a risk researchers call sequence of returns risk. For someone spending $50,000 a year, that rule of thumb points to roughly $1.25 million invested. It sounds enormous stated all at once, which is exactly why almost nobody reaches it in one dramatic leap. Daniel didn't get a windfall. He didn't day trade his way there. He saved a consistent percentage of an ordinary income for a long time, kept his lifestyle roughly flat as his income grew, and let the market do the compounding. The same dividend snowball, the same 401k tiers. The same keep the same car for 10 years math we've covered in this series. None of those videos are separate topics. They're all pieces of the same number. Here's the calculation that reframes this entire topic. A widely cited illustrative model, Mr. Money Mustache's shockingly simple math, assumes a 5% real after inflation return and a 4% safe withdrawal rate in retirement, and asks a single question. Given a savings rate, how many years until your investments alone can replace your income? The answer isn't a straight line. At a 10% savings rate, the model suggests roughly 51 years to reach that point. At 25%, roughly 32 years. At 50%, roughly 17 years. At 75%, roughly 7 years. Wait, going from 10 to 25% saved cuts off almost 20 years? That's not just a small improvement. Exactly, and that's the part most people miss. The relationship isn't proportional, because two things are happening at once. With every percentage point you save instead of spend, your portfolio grows faster, and the annual expense number your portfolio eventually needs to cover shrinks. Saving more doesn't just add fuel to the tank, it also shortens the road. Daniel's actual savings rate has moved between 35 and 45% over the years, not 50 or 75. Nothing extreme, but consistently well above the 10 to 15% that's often cited as a typical savings rate. That gap, held for a long career, is the entire reason 5 years ago arrived when it did instead of decades later. Full financial independence isn't the only useful milestone on this path. There are two well-known stepping stones worth knowing, because they change real decisions long before the final number arrives. Coast FI is the point where your current investments, left completely untouched with no further contributions, are mathematically projected to grow into your full FI number by a normal retirement age purely through compounding. Reaching Coast FI doesn't mean you can stop working, it means you no longer have to keep saving for retirement specifically, because time and compounding are already projected to finish that job. Many people who hit Coast FI use the freed-up cash flow to work fewer hours, take a lower-stress job, or simply stop stressing about retirement contributions while still covering today's bills through work. Barista FI is a related but different milestone, enough invested that withdrawals could cover most, but not all, of your living expenses, with a lower stress or part-time job covering the remaining gap, sometimes chosen specifically because it comes with health insurance. Neither of these requires reaching the intimidating 7-figure number first. Both are real, checkable milestones that can change a work decision years before full financial independence ever arrives. Here's where Drake and Daniel's instincts genuinely differ. Drake imagines that hitting this number would mean quitting on the spot, telling his boss exactly what he thinks, and disappearing to a beach. Daniel crossed his number on an ordinary Tuesday. He kept working, partly because he genuinely didn't hate his job once money stopped being the reason he showed up, and partly because 2 more years of income let the portfolio keep growing with zero pressure to touch it. His spending didn't change because his spending was never the thing waiting on this number. He wasn't secretly miserable and suppressing it for 5 years. The whole approach was built around a lifestyle he already didn't need to escape from. That's why nobody around him noticed. There was no visible before and after to notice. The shift happened entirely on a brokerage statement, not in his day-to-day life. What did change, quietly, was leverage. Daniel started saying no to unreasonable requests at work without the usual anxiety, because a paycheck stopping wasn't actually a crisis anymore. He negotiated harder in a salary conversation, because walking away was a real option, not a bluff. This is the actual prize of financial independence for most people who reach it, not a permanent vacation, but work becoming optional instead of mandatory. Some people keep working exactly as before. Some downshift to part-time or lower stress work. Some do eventually stop entirely. The number doesn't force any particular choice. It just removes the requirement. There's a psychological side to this that rarely gets covered. Because it complicates an otherwise clean success story, reaching the number doesn't automatically feel the way people expect it to. For a lot of people who reach financial independence, the years of disciplined saving that got them there were themselves a source of identity and structure. The goal, the tracking, the habit. When the goal is technically achieved, some people report a strange flatness rather than triumph, precisely because the thing that organized their decisions for years no longer needs active management. Daniel's version of this wasn't a crisis, just a quiet adjustment period, figuring out what enough actually meant day to day once the numbers stopped being the primary thing to optimize. This is part of why so many people who reach FI keep working in some form, not purely financial caution, but because a totally unstructured identity shift all at once is its own real adjustment. Arguably a bigger one than the financial math ever was. You don't need Daniel's exact number to use this idea. Multiply your own annual expenses by 25 and you have a rough, non-guaranteed target. Then look at your current savings rate, because that percentage, more than your income, determines how many years stand between you and that number. And whether Coast FI or Barista FI might arrive years before the full milestone does. It's a number worth knowing even if you're decades away from it, because it reframes every raise, every new expense, and every car payment as a choice about how far away that number stays. Financial independence is 25 times your annual expenses, as a rough rule of thumb. Your savings rate, not your income, decides the timeline, and the jump from 10 to 25% saved can cut decades off the wait. Coast FI and Barista FI are real milestones on the way there, not just the final number. And reaching it often looks like nothing at all from the outside. The real prize is optional work, not a dramatic exit. And even that shift comes with its own quiet adjustment. This video is for educational purposes only and is not personalized financial advice. The 4% rule, 25 times expenses figure, and savings rate to years model are commonly cited rules of thumb and illustrative models, not guarantees. Actual safe withdrawal rates vary with market conditions and individual circumstances. Consider speaking with a qualified financial planner before making retirement or withdrawal decisions. If this reframed what financial independence actually looks like, subscribe. New videos every week on the personal finance topics school never covered. Next up, how landlords treat you completely differently depending on one 3-digit number, your credit score.